Hello, everyone. Kristy Woodson Harvey here. I am really excited because I'm going to do something that I have never done before. So, this might be obvious, but as an author, the number one things that I get asked about the very most from you guys and emails and DMs and at book events and all of that is about publishing and writing and what that process is like for me. And so, I thought it would be really fun to finally put something together just about my process, about how I write and how I got published and how I got an agent and all of those things that I get asked about a lot. And so I was going to call this my writing tips series. And then I was like, no, I'm actually not even going to call it that, because one of the things that you'll hear me say probably over and over again is that I think everybody's writing process is really different. And so if I had one tip overall, it's that you shouldn't listen to what anybody else says, not even me. So I don't know if that's a good way to start the video, but that's truly what I believe, and actually leads a little bit into my own story of becoming a writer. If you know me in real life, I'm pretty type A. Like, I like rules and I like plans and I like to know what's coming, and I like to have a real process for everything that I do. And it took me a long time to realize that writing was going to be the thing for me that didn't look like that, that was a little bit different. But so at first, when I was starting out, I tried to gather all the rules. I read all these books by all these people, and there were some things that I sort of had in my head, like first-time authors should only write in third person. Like, that's, 100% what you should do, because you don't have the grasp to be able to write in first person, and no one should ever write in second person, for goodness sake. And then you should always have an outline because it helps you from getting stuck and, all of these things. So just on and on. There were all these rules that I had in my head about how to write a book. And so I tried to write a couple of manuscripts following all these rules that I had amassed from these things that I had read. And they were fine. I mean, they were books, and, they had a beginning, middle, and end, but there was nothing yet that I was like super excited and passionate about. And so when my son was born, I got an idea for a new story called Dear Carolina. And for those of you who have children and have had a new baby at home, you know that your world is sort of turned upside down, right? Like, you hardly have time to wash your hair. You certainly don't have time to write a book. But I just had this story idea that absolutely would not let me go. And so it became the thing that I would do, like when I was up in the middle of the night, or just when I had like a little break in the day, or, whatever it may be. It was just, I would jot down little bits and pieces of this story. And that was such a gift to me because I didn't have time to worry about the rules. And so the way that the story came to me was in second person, which, oh my gosh, of all the rules, never write a book in second person. That is a terrible idea. And I realized I'm not an outliner. I knew that about myself. Like, when I was in high school, I was the kid that when you had to write the paper and you had to turn in the outline ahead of time, I would write the paper and then make up the outline based on the paper that I had already written, because that's just how my brain works. So why I thought writing an outline for a book was a good idea for me, I'm not sure. But again, I wanted to follow the rules. And so with Dear Carolina, I didn't have time for any of that. I didn't have time to do an outline. I was doing really well if I could get, like a little 10 or 20 minute segment of writing in, and I would sit down and I would write just the next part of the book that was kind of on my heart, like what I'd been thinking about, what I'd been mulling over all day. And it wasn't necessarily in order. It didn't necessarily, make sense to me at the time. But that was what I did. And it was the first time that I had sort of let all the rules that I thought I was supposed to have for myself go. And it was the first time that I finished a book that I felt like I was really proud of, that I felt like maybe even less than I was proud of it, but more that I felt like my voice was in there somewhere. And I think that is kind of the most important part of being a writer. You and I can tell the same 10 stories, but I tell it in my voice and you tell it in yours, and we give the reader a totally different experience. So I think for me, rule number one is that sometimes you have to throw the rules out the window. So one of my favorite yoga instructors always says that life is as much about surrender as it is about control. And I think for me, that's the thing that I have to keep coming back to, because it's really hard for me to be able to let go of control of this area of my life, to be able to sit down and write something knowing that I might not 100% know where it's going. And so this might not be your situation, but for me, when I would write that outline and then I would start writing And then I would have that little tingle and that little ping that would make me know that a character was maybe going to do something different than what I originally thought, or the story was going to maybe go in a little bit of a different direction than I thought it was going to. But because I had that outline and because that was how the story was supposed to go, I wouldn't let myself go down those avenues. And I think knowing what I know now with my 11th book, A Happier Life, about to come out, those little tingles and those little sparks and those little, I wasn't planning that. Those are the things that kind of make magic in a book. And my friends who are like super diligent outliners will tell you the exact same thing, that sometimes when you go in a different path than you thought you were going to, you end up opening a door that is really awesome and great and something that you really want to explore. And then again, sometimes it's terrible, and that's what your delete button is for. So that's a good thing. But I remind myself that a lot, that I have to sometimes just surrender to the story. And I think part of the reason for that is that when you sit down to start writing, you have this vague idea of who these characters are. You might have some characteristics of them. You might have some conversations in your mind with other characters. You might have an idea of what their story arc is. But even if you're a really diligent outliner, you probably don't 100% know who these people are. And the reason that I say that is because if you and I met at a cocktail party and we talked for 5 minutes, we would have, an idea about who each other was, right? Like, I'm a writer, I live in Beaufort. I like to play tennis, whatever. But if you've known me for 5 years, you can start to understand how I might react in a situation before I've even been in the situation. You might know my opinion about something before you even have to ask me. Things like that when you're developing this like deep, close relationship with someone, a friendship, or even, it doesn't even have to be someone that you like that much, but just the more you get to know someone and the more you know how they're going to react in a situation, the more you can understand how they're going to evolve through time too. And I think it's the same way with our characters. So when we start out and we have this plan, sometimes we can't always stick to it. And I'll give you an example of that. So my book Feels Like Falling. I remember finishing that book and I was with my husband at a hotel. He was on a work trip. And so I had gone with him. I was like, I'm going to lock myself in this hotel room and I'm going to finish this book. And so I went down for dinner and I met him and he said, how'd your day of writing go? And I was like, gosh, that book ended the exact opposite way that I thought it was going to. And he was like, what do you mean? You wrote it. How could it end a different way than you thought it was going to end? You're in charge of the story. But it was one of those books where the main character had evolved to a point that I didn't think that I was going to be able to get her to in 350 or 400 pages. And so when that happened, she ended up making different choices for herself at the end. So if I was going to boil all this down for you into my writing tip that you can take or leave, because again, the most important thing is figuring out what works for you. It's that sometimes life is as much about surrender as it is about control, and sometimes writing is as much about surrender as it is about control. So when you're starting out something new, just kind of be open to what's going to happen and be willing to explore those avenues and where you might go and where the story might take you that you weren't even expecting.